open the floor to our regular format, that is, questions and answers on all things philosophical, general lifestyle, spiritual, consciousness, happiness related, anything and everything in this Sangha. Let us read from another few pages of Swami Tadatmanandaji's book, The Roar of the Ganges, which was sent to us by one of our fellow Sangis, Sky Guardian. Swamiji has given us his blessing in reading this book together, and he tells me that it will be soon made available for free as a PDF. So if you wanted to get a copy of it yourself, you don't have to wait. Or sorry, if you just wait, then you'll be able to read it for free. Otherwise, it's available on Amazon, I believe. Thank you, Babesha, for your heart meet. Radhe, Radhe. So here we are in India, and this is more of a story of Swami Tadatmanandaji's life, or as he was known back then, Mark the computer engineer consultant. Here he is in the Swami Dayananda Ashram, which is in Rishikesh, a very spiritual city in North India. Berrien was his last name, and thank you for the Swami lore. Mark Berrien. Interesting. Well, I joined the line in the dining hall where food was served from huge buckets onto stainless steel plates we held in our hands. Breakfast today was puffed rice, not the breakfast cereal served with cold milk, but a steaming, spicy mixture, yellow with turmeric. I enjoy spicy foods, but not for breakfast. I found that a cup or two of heavily sweetened tea helped a lot. I sat with the others seated on thin mats stretched out in rows on the dining hall floor. We ate in silence, deftly scooping up the rice with our fingers. Spoons and forks are seldom used here. Outside the dining hall, a long trough-like sink with 20 faucets was provided for washing our utensils. I left my plate and cup on a table to dry and returned to my room to finish unpacking. Inside the bathroom, my reptilian roommate was still hanging from the ceiling. What do lizards eat for breakfast? I mused. My chores finished, I walked down to the courtyard where Mataji was working in the garden. She looked up from the thorny rose bush she was pruning and fussed over me for a few minutes, fulfilling her self-appointed role as ashram mother. She then directed me to the lecture hall where the morning class was about to begin. Each morning at 9 in the morning, Swami Prakash taught a class on the Bhagavad Gita, the most celebrated of all Hindu scriptures. I didn't remember meeting Swami Prakash before. I presumed he was a disciple of Swami Dayananda. I approached the stairway next to the temple and climbed to the roomy second-floor hall. Inside, the morning sun steamed in through windows facing the temple's dome and the river flowing beyond. On the carpeted floor, 20 students sat attentively, men to the right, women to the left. I entered quietly and sat on the floor behind the men. All eyes were fixed on Swami Prakash, a saffron-robed sannyasi of about 40 years who sat cross-legged on a low platform at the front of the hall. I recognized him instantly, even though his neatly trimmed beard and wire-framed glasses were new to me. I first met him a few years ago when he was a student, then known as Brahmachari Murali. I knew he had recently been initiated as a sannyasi. He received a new name, then according to custom, but I had not learned his new name was Prakash. As the others filed out of the hall after class came to an end, I went to greet him. "Namaste, Swamiji," I said with a smile. "Do you remember me?" "Mark," he exclaimed in sudden recognition. "Of course I remember you. You are from the Pennsylvania ashram, isn't it?" "I'm glad you remember me, Swamiji. Congratulations on your initiation as a sannyasi." "Ah yes, that is good news, isn't it?" We walked down the stairs together. He led me to one of the benches facing the river where we sat and talked. His accent was not strong like Vijay's. I wanted to ask him about his initiation. With my own initiation only weeks away, I could scarcely take my mind off the subject. Even though a process spanning a dozen years had led me to this point, and even though I had confronted and addressed my doubts long before boarding the plane in New York, I still felt somewhat apprehensive. My heart was troubled, not by doubt, but by fear. Fear of embarking on an unknown path. Fear of becoming entangled in problems I had not previously considered. I hoped Swami Prakash could share insights that might allay my fears. I asked him to describe the events that led to his becoming a sannyasi. I would share the news of my coming initiation with him later. Swami Prakash seemed embarrassed at first by my request, but when I persisted, he began his story. He told me he came from a large family. He was the 7th of 12 children. As he grew up, his older brothers got married, wanting to happily get settled. But after their marriages, he found that they were not always happy. They had many problems: financial problems, work problems, family problems. They got married to enjoy a happy life, but all they seemed to find was grief. He went on to say, "I thought that I, too, will have many problems if I get married. But then, if I don't get married, who will cook for me or care for me when I am sick? Married or not, I will still have problems, just different problems." The more I thought about marriage, family, career, and so on, the more I realized that I really didn't know how or where to find happiness in life. Swami Prakash told me that he attended Hatha Yoga classes at an ashram near his house and happened to hear a Swami teach a class on Vedanta. He had never even heard the word Vedanta before and didn't know what to expect. He found that these teachings seemed to address his fundamental questions about life. He gradually became more interested and later moved to live in the ashram. He stayed for a year, practicing yoga and studying Vedanta, before coming here to Rishikesh to continue his practice at the Sivananda Ashram. I asked how he met Swami Dayananda. He explained, "When I lived at the Sivananda Ashram, a brahmachari friend invited me to come visit this ashram when Swami Dayananda was staying here and teaching for 1 full month. I attended a class and was so amazed by the clarity of his teachings that I returned every day for the rest of the month. Later, he was to begin teaching a 3-year course in Vedanta and Sanskrit in Bombay. So I decided to leave the Sivananda Ashram and attend that course. After it ended, I returned to live here in the Swami Dayananda Ashram. When I asked how he began teaching, he replied, "Once some young ashram residents here asked me to teach a class on the Bhagavad Gita. I didn't think I would be a good teacher, but after we started, they seemed to enjoy the classes. I eventually found that I was content with a life of study, teaching, and meditation. I really wasn't interested in doing anything else, so it is not surprising that I became a sannyasi, isn't it?" Then he abruptly changed topics. "Now, you must tell me about yourself. I have met other Westerners who came to India seeking spiritual truth. Some came here and listened to just a few classes before leaving to travel around the country like tourists. But you have spent years studying Vedanta and Sanskrit in the traditional way, isn't it?" "Yes," I answered, "but there are many from the West who have discovered the value of traditional study." He asked me to tell my whole story, so I began that I was the first of 3 children born to a hard-working businessman and caring mother in the suburbs of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My childhood and adolescence were unremarkable, except for a few rebellious teenage years during the days of anti-war protests and widespread drug use in the late 1960s. I married my high school sweetheart, completed a degree in electrical engineering, and went to work for high-tech companies in California. As a precocious young engineer, I quickly became one of the whiz kids of the burgeoning new microcomputer field. Instant success bloated my ego. I suffered from an affliction peculiar to those in their early 20s. I thought I knew everything, when I actually knew nothing. Both my young wife and I were emotionally immature. We did not know how to build a healthy marriage. Before long, she felt that she could no longer live with an insensitive, arrogant computer nerd. She left me without warning. I was so preoccupied with my work and oblivious to everything else that I had never suspected such a thing could happen. I lived those early years of my adult life quite unaware, as if I were in a state of partial unconsciousness. I was blind to realities around me, such as my wife's feelings, and I was blind to realities within me as well. My own feelings went unacknowledged. I was jolted out of this dull slumber by the shock of being unexpectedly abandoned when my wife left. My shock turned to sadness, sadness to loneliness, and loneliness to depression. I suffered deeply, yet that bitter experience was a blessing in disguise. It was my wake-up call. It drew my attention inward and forced to examine myself. Not surprisingly, I didn't like what I saw. In the period of introspection that followed, relentless pain forced me to re-examine my beliefs. I discovered that some of my cherished notions were exceedingly naive. I thought that by working hard and becoming successful, I could create a life of fulfillment for myself. But could success truly guarantee happiness? Even if my marriage had been successful, would that have guaranteed happiness? In an uncertain world, happiness can be snatched away in a moment by countless uncontrollable events. Illness, bad timing, a mistake, almost anything. Is it realistic, I wondered, to hope for a happy, contented life? Or are we doomed to live lives of struggle and of suffering? These questions really gnawed at me, I explained. I didn't know if there were any answers, but I felt compelled to find out. Swami Prakash nodded vigorously, his head wobbling spiritedly from side to side in the typical Indian gesture of agreement. Then he remarked, "Even in America, you could not find happiness, isn't it? I always thought that in America, people would be more happy." "That's a big misconception," I responded. "Americans may be wealthier and have more opportunities than people here in India, but they are no happier. Sometimes I feel that Americans, on the average, might be even less happy than most Indians." "How can that be so?" he asked. "Suppose an American has a nice family, a nice job, thousands of dollars in the bank, and then he realizes that in spite of everything, he is still not happy. He might very likely lose all hope and become so depressed that he needs a psychiatrist." We both laughed before I continued. "Imagine what would happen if somebody won a $50 million lottery. Within a year, he might purchase luxurious houses, cars, boats, televisions, everything. Maybe he would invest part of his fortune so he would no longer need to work. The next year, he might travel around the world, staying in 5-star hotels and living lavishly. By the third year, the excitement of being wealthy would probably have started to wear off. And after 10 years, he might end up so utterly bored with his decadent lifestyle that he is ready to kill himself." Swami Prakash seemed amused by my fantasy. He pointed out the similarity of our personal experiences. We had both considered what we might achieve in life: success, wealth, family, relationships, and travel. Such achievements would be pleasing, no doubt, but they would always be limited. They could never ensure lasting happiness and contentment. We both recognized the futility of seeking complete fulfillment through worldly pursuits alone. Yet, we could not resign ourselves to lives of sadness and discomfort. We believed that a fulfilled life might somehow be possible. Each of us undertook a quest and stumbled along various paths until we found someone who had already discovered what we were seeking, someone who could point the way. Our stories were hardly novel. Every generation has begotten many who came to the same conclusions and have undertaken the same quest. Thousands of years ago, a discerning sage expressed the same insight in beautiful Sanskrit poetry recorded in this famous passage from the Mundaka Upanishad. "A person of wisdom who considers the limits of everything gained through life's empty labors abandons vain striving when he understands mere action leads not to lasting fulfillment. To realize that goal, may he duly approach a competent teacher who not only knows the scriptures complete, but also abides steadfast in reality, in fullness, in peace." Swami Prakash and I both saw how this pattern recognizing the limitation of worldly pursuits and seeking spiritual guidance was almost invariably present in the lives of spiritual seekers. I have borne witness to this pattern many times, having been privileged to meet hundreds of seekers in the United States and India. I learned much from their stories. Each had a unique saga of setting out on a spiritual journey. Some began by heeding an inner call to explore a contemplative art like meditation, hatha yoga, or tai chi. Others were compelled by a significant event in life, sometimes by a tragic moment like the death of a loved one, sometimes by an uplifting incident or powerful spiritual experience. Others simply happened to read an inspiring book or hear a thought-provoking lecture, perhaps, or meet someone deeply engaged in a particular spiritual practice. Let us pause our reading there for now and continue with reading Swami Tadatmanandaji's Roar of the Ganges at a later time. For now, I thank my dear viewers for listening with me. What a wonderful expression from Mark to Swami Prakash of his own experience as a computer engineer, newlywed to a lonely spiritual seeker. I hope you enjoyed that section as much as I did. And thank you to those who sent a gift whilst I read. Please allow me the privilege of extending my gratitude back to you now